Shall we start?
Yeah. Yes, we can do, sir.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to this webinar on outcome-based education, roadmap to e-learning and accreditation. It is indeed a pleasure for us to have all of you here on this webinar, despite your busy schedules. And there may be multiple webinars happening at this same point of time. And indeed, very nice of you to have thought over to attend this webinar by Informatics on outcome-based education, a roadmap to e-learning and accreditation. We have been encountering a cultural change over the last couple of months due to this lockdown and COVID-19 crisis. There have been changes in the way we have been meeting people. There have been changes in the way we have been conducting our meetings. Basically, these cultural changes have come in the directions of work from home. Learning process has moved online. We have started learning. In fact, we have started learning and reading more, and we have started learning more online. Our conferences, even in our day-to-day life, our conferences that happen, the meetings that happen in the office have all moved online. Seminars have converted themselves into webinars. So there are more number of webinars happening. And in fact, very interesting is seminars used to have participation of 100, 200, but webinars, there is no restriction of movement. So you tend to attend more webinars at different point of time. As I said, meetings have started converting online. Our all kind of roundtable discussions have all started converted or turned into online. In fact, keeping this in mind, also to ensure that we are able to disseminate more information to more people on the right subjects that we are into, we initiated a national webinar series. We wanted to update all institutions on the latest happening on information and education domain. This webinar today is the second in series of the national webinar series that we have initiated. Before we begin the webinar, I thought let me spend a couple of minutes on telling you about Informatics. Established in 1980, we call ourselves as an internet company in the pre-internet days. Founded by Mr. N V Satyanarayana, we are headquartered in Bangalore with a staff strength of 150 people. We have global and local clients who we address with our products and services in domain of content products, library technology products, content management and publishing services, distribution, and e-learning solutions. To give you a brief introduction on Informatics, I'll play a small couple of minutes multimedia, which would give you an insight into Informatics, past, present, and the future.
40 years ago, when information was scarce and online was unheard of, Informatics was envisioned with a digital vision by an entrepreneur working as a librarian then to bridge the global information access gap in the country. This pioneering vision is a global company today with products and services benefiting millions of users in the academic, research, and corporate segments around the world. India Today magazine described the venture as the first online information company in India for global knowledge access. Serving global information companies on a project for supplying consolidated Indian business information helped Informatics to ideate its first digital information product named India Business Insight, IBI. Credited with the enviable reputation as the pioneers in the online and CD-ROM-based information business in India, Informatics started creating new digital information products through 1990s. NeuroMed on CD, a product initiative funded by NIMHANS Bangalore, was the earliest e-journal archive in India for Indian medical journals. Driven by the internet advantage, Informatics developed its first global information product named JGate. JGate is truly the world's largest database for journal literature by its coverage of over 50,000 journals. The journey has continued with a diverse portfolio of products and services evolving across 4 business units: information products, digital library solutions, enterprise content management and publishing. The product family of Informatics is a growing list with innovation driven by the latest in technology and evolving market needs. In an industry where content is the king and technology is the master, Informatics has been a proud pioneer and leading player. Gaining 40 years of insightful experience by 2020, Informatics continues to be driven by values with a passion to deliver excellence.
So this was a brief introduction on informatics. As informatics today celebrates 40th anniversary, in these national webinar series, we are pleased to start the second webinar on outcome-based education, a roadmap to e-learning and accreditation. There were 5 points that actually compelled us to take this topic. In the current lockdown times, as well as in the non-lockdown times, we find there was a growing demand for e-learning. There was a need for an e-learning platform to measure the outcome of learning, also to measure the outcome for teaching, and also what are the documents required for accreditation, what are the data required for accreditation, is there any platform that could help us to get that data for accreditation. So we thought, why not have a webinar on the outcome-based education. Today, to take up this topic on outcome-based education, we have 2 key leading speakers. We have with us Dr. N J Rao, former Chairman, Department of Management Studies, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, to speak on the key topic. And chairing today's session, we have Professor R. Chandrashekhar, Professor and Dean Academics from the International Institute of Information Technology, IIIT, Bangalore. Just to introduce you to Professor R. Chandrashekhar, he has been a faculty member of IIIT since 2007. Having obtained his PhD from Mississippi State University, he has 10 years of extensive experience in application software development in multinational organizations. And his current interests are information convergence and software engineering technology, and technology for education, and enterprise architecture and content management. I would not like to be in between the speaker and all of you here. I pass on the baton to Professor R. Chandrashekhar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjay, for the kind introduction, and good afternoon to all of you. I think these are a positive way of looking at it as an educationist is, I would say these are all exciting times. Many of us as educationists are doing a lot of things which we never dreamt that we would be doing as a professor, as a lecturer, or as a faculty member. But then all it took was about a month and a half of havoc to be unleashed, and all of us seem to have braced up and trying to figure out how to cope with all these challenges, right? So given this kind of a situation, this whole topic of outcome-based education is incredibly relevant, right? So I would like to give you a perspective of outcome-based education in the context of higher education for now, right? As educationists, we already have tremendous amount of responsibility in our hands to shape the future of the industry, right? Of the country, of the nation itself, right? which means the graduates who are going to come out of the institutions where we teach and where we impart education, they need to be able to deliver and meet the expectations of the nation, correct? So given that kind of a situation, how do we even know what is it that we are supposed to be doing, correct? So the traditional approach has been that if we have a group of educationists who are very well-meaning and who are very well accomplished, and you send your children to learn with them, then you would hope that they would come out with the right kind of education which will help. But this is more or less like the ancient Gurukul system, correct? But then we also need to be aware that many of these things are, we need to be able to do it in a very scalable manner and in a very efficient manner, correct? So, and effective manner, of course. So if we have to make it efficient and scalable and effective, so how do we go about doing it, right? So that is where this whole concept of outcome-based education comes in. So wherein you try to prioritize what is it that you want the graduates to be able to do once they are through with their education, right? So which means you have to identify what is it that they need to be able to do when they are through with the program, and then we can fine-tune our teaching and learning experience of the students to be able to reach those outcomes, right? The benefit of this particular approach is that you can be more or less be sure that if a student has gone through this particular process of outcome-based education, they will be more or less be able to deliver, right? Of course, this is a continuum. This is not a discrete positive, negative kind of an outcome we are talking about. So, but with the expectation that a large number of them will be able to meet those outcomes and deliver as per the expectations of the industry, expectations of whatever field they choose to continue post their education. So in that context, say outcome-based education can be viewed both as a proper noun, which has got a very specific definition, which Professor Rao would definitely go into in great amount of depth. But I also want you to internalize the concept of outcome-based education from in spirit as well, not just in letter. What does that mean? Which means that anything that any education that we are imparting, in fact, anything in academics can be related to outcome-based, right? It need not be only confined to teaching, right? It can be for research as well, right? So when we are trying to guide a student on research, or if you yourself are doing research, then thinking in terms of outcomes and what is it that we need to be able to accomplish will go a long way in giving meaning to whatever actions we are taking. Okay, so that is the broad spirit behind outcome-based education and its importance. Now, at this point, I also want to bring in the relevance of e-learning or education technology here. Correct? I think we are at a state right now wherein, as Professor Rao would tell you, outcome-based education itself was originally proposed as early as 1990s. But today, now is the time when we have all the tools and processes and procedures at our disposal, which will enable us to have a sincere shot at following outcome-based educations. Because if you want to really get the most out of outcome-based education, we need to be able to work with a lot of information, a lot of data. Correct? So, so there will be a lot of metrics that need to be collected, which needs to be fed back into the system to improve the overall quality of the system. How do you do that? I mean, especially in a country like India, wherein we are talking about right, so nearly more than 1 million engineers taking admission every hour, writing entrance exams for admissions all over the country. So with that kind of numbers, if we have to be effective in following outcome-based education, we must embrace technology. And I don't think there is any two ways about that. Okay, so when as you're going through this particular webinar or even future webinars, or when you're reading about the material, so please keep in mind that of course being very familiar and comfortable with outcome-based education, what are the steps involved, what are the metrics that you need to collect, those things are extremely important. But I implore you to be open to using technology, which will help you be very effective with your outcome-based education. Okay, so without much further ado, I would like to turn it over to Professor N J Rao. Professor N J Rao's brief introduction was already given. His earlier association with IISc and his active involvement with the standards process is also very, very well known and well established. And at this point, I would like to mention about my own personal connect with Professor N J Rao during his time with IIIT Bangalore as a faculty there. So I had the privilege of working very closely with him on a very complex implementation of outcome-based education using high-end technology. So which is why I'm so passionate about bringing both of them together. Okay, so over to you, Professor Rao. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greetings to all of you. Today's webinar is on outcome-based education, has been given to you. And this time I have a peculiar requirement that we need to talk about outcome-based education with regard to what you call general programs as well as professional programs. Normally we don't combine these two into a single presentation. I'm just trying to make an attempt that I can meet all your expectations with regard to outcome-based education. See, the beginning of this OBE is that right from 1970s, all people concerned with school education as well as higher education, they wanted to find out what is it that actually the students are learning, different from what is it that the teachers are teaching. These two are different, not particularly unrelated, but these two are different. So somewhere around that time, they started talking about the entire education from the perspective of the student. That is, they want it to be student-centric education. And actually the term outcome-based education was presented by William Spaddy in 1994 through his book, Outcome-Based Education, Critical Issues and Answers. The book is available online. Those of you who are interested in looking at the beginning of this. But the book is more related to school education. And subsequently, this outcome-based education was carried over to engineering by ABET, that is Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology of USA, and they started writing about outcomes of engineering programs there. So OBE means starting with a clear picture of what is important for students to be able to do, the emphasis on to be able to do, and then organizing the curriculum, that means the entire program, instruction and assessment to make sure this learning ultimately happens. Please note that you cannot separate curriculum, instruction and assessment and expect to get the results. That means by merely writing outcomes, you will not achieve your goal. You have to talk about the instruction as well, more importantly, the assessment, to make sure the learning ultimately really happens. Now, education is a field that thousands and thousands of teachers, researchers work with. So what happens, these outcomes of learning are referred to in the literature by many terms. Merely outcomes, learning outcomes, intended learning outcomes, instructional objectives, educational objectives, behavioral objectives, performance objectives, terminal objectives, general instructional objectives, specific learning outcomes, subordinate skills, subordinate objectives, and competencies. At one level, you can consider all of them are the same, but at some other level, people may want to make slight differences between them. Right now, for our consideration, we consider all these terms refer to the same thing. They are outcomes of learning. Now, formally, what are outcomes? An outcome of an education is what the student should be able to do at the end of a program, a course, or an instructional unit. Instead of that, we can also say an outcome of an education is what the student should be able to do at the end of a learning experience. That learning experience can be a few hours of instruction in the classroom or otherwise, or a semester course, or an entire program, 2 to 4 year program that you have. So, once again, the outcome-based education is an approach to education in which decisions about the curriculum are driven by the exit learning outcomes that the student should demonstrate at the end of the program or course. So you have to define what these exit learning outcomes are, but these exit learning outcomes are something that you cannot arbitrarily define. It depends on a large number of factors. What kind of students, with what background are they coming, what kind of resources do you have, what kind of faculty you have, what kind of technology you have access to, and so on and on. So each institute will have to somewhat fine-tune the exit learning outcomes of their programs to suit their environment. Though not all institutes will have freedom on all aspects, we'll presently see when you are awarding degrees. And also the outcomes play a major role in terms of interaction between the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders for a program? It is starting from parents, students, faculty, the management of the institute, the university, and you have accreditation bodies, or you have regulatory bodies, and you have industry or employers who employ your graduates, and generally the entire business scenario. So what happens is, if one wants to communicate what exactly you're doing, how do you communicate? Unfortunately, at present, what they do is they give a kind of a book on curriculum, which will list topics of various courses, if sometimes very briefly, sometimes elaborately, but that's all. But from that, the industry cannot really make out, or the others cannot make out what exactly the students are graduating with. Now, for example, we need to say whenever you are involved in any kind of learning, you have to first write what is the outcome. So let us say, what is the outcome of this webinar? Understand the need and relationship of outcomes and accreditation. I made it very brief. We'll focus only on outcomes and its relationship with accreditation. So again, I keep repeating this. Outcome-based education is an approach to education in which decisions about curriculum, instruction, and assessment, please note all the three, are driven by the exit learning outcomes the student should display at the end of a program or a course. So if you're looking at a program, at the end of either 2 years, 3 years, or 4-year program, when you're getting a graduate, what exactly he should be able to do? That I need to define. Now, one major feature of outcome-based education is product defines the process. Till now, it has been input defines the product. That is not the way we want to do. The product defines the process means I'm defining what the output at the end of certain activity or at the end of program. Now, all my processes should be designed or implemented to reach that particular goal. Or you say, goal defines the process. That means the goal will have to be very clearly mentioned or written down, and all the concerned people will have to own that particular goal. Okay, each one cannot have their own independent goals. It doesn't mean that you are completely destroying the freedom of the faculty. We'll presently see all the academic freedom that a faculty member expects to have, they are preserved. But except that saying that you first say what you want your student to be able to do, that is your choice, but make sure that he's getting that and make sure that is communicated to the students. So the outcome-based education is really opposite of input-based education, where the emphasis is on educational process and where we are happy to accept whatever is the result. Unfortunately or incidentally, in majority of the so-called good institutions, still in my opinion, it is input-based education. Faculty member decides what are the inputs that he wants to give, and then he will test based on whatever inputs that he has given, and so you accept whatever is the result. And this is where you have to reverse this process. Now, a little bit about higher education programs. We broadly divide higher education programs into professional programs and general programs. Okay? You have professional programs, which are engineering, management, architecture, medicine, nursing, pharmacy, chartered accountancy, fashion design, and many more. And more are getting added these days. It's a long list. They are regulated and accredited by designated government bodies. Okay? So the government plays a role in terms of identifying some bodies which will say what kind of professional programs it should be done. For example, engineering programs are a 4-year duration. You cannot run a 3-year degree program and say it is equivalent to 4 years. You cannot call it BE program. Okay? That's what it means. And engineering programs are regulated by IISc, All India Council for Technical Education, and accredited by the NBA, which is National Board of Accreditation. And correspondingly, even the management in some sense comes under NBA. Architecture, there is an Architecture Council. Medicine, there is ICM, Indian Medical Council. Nursing has one Nursing Council, and so on. Every one of them will have some regulatory body as well as an accrediting body. Please remember that. Whereas general programs, we talk about 2 to 4 year programs in social sciences, mathematics, humanities, arts, etc. Whatever label that you want to give. And here, there are, for example, there are BSc programs which are 4-year duration, like in all IIScs and IITs. And you dominantly in the country, you have about mostly a 3-year degree programs. This is a little still British legacy, and we are still not willing to deviate from this 3-year degree programs. And incidentally, these 3-year degree programs are given by something like 40,000 colleges across the country. So if you want to make any small change, you please remember that there are 40,000 colleges. And but I'm saying 2 to 4 year, that means I'm including the postgraduate programs as well, which are generally of 2-year duration. And institutions offering general programs are regulated by the University Grants Commission and accredited by NAAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council. So broadly, this is the picture of higher education programs in the country. There are various exceptions to that. We will not go through them. If you remember these two, that's why we look at the engineering programs here. We are not going to look at all the other programs, and we look at general programs. Any 3-year degree program or 4-year program in any of these areas. And what kind of higher education institutions you have? You have universities, and you have deemed to be universities. The difference between them is universities also have affiliating colleges to university. Like you have VTU, Visvesvaraya Technological University in Karnataka. They have a few hundred engineering colleges affiliated to this. But deemed to be university is different. They only award degrees. They don't have other institutions affiliated to them. And then you have autonomous colleges. Generally in India, as of now, autonomous colleges also cannot award degrees, so they have to be affiliated to one of the universities. That means autonomous here would mean college will have both academic and administrative autonomy from the university, but they have to follow some guidelines given by the university. Whereas non-autonomous colleges, which are very large in number, unfortunately from my point of view, more than 90% of the colleges in the country are non-autonomous colleges. They're affiliated to some university, and university decides the curriculum through their boards of studies, and they conduct a centralized examination, and even they declare the results, and the college faculty have only limited option of managing the continuous internal assessment, as we call class tests and assignments and so on. And you also have some institutions awarding diplomas and certificates. Of course, the biggest example that gives diploma is all the IIMs. Indian Institution of Management, they don't, or as of now, they don't want to give degrees. They will only give a PG diploma, PGDM, they call it, okay? And let's come to, the whole thing is related to accreditation. The regulatory body and the accrediting body, that is either NBA or NAAC, together they provide a framework of designing your program and conducting the program, making sure the quality is maintained. So there is a process of accreditation. After all, an educational institution is a social institution. You cannot say that I want to do what I want. This is what I consider the best. Because you are answerable to so many of the stakeholders. And you have to keep proving to your stakeholders, both to your incoming students, to outgoing students, parents, industry, and all that, that you are doing a good job of whatever you are expected to do. Essentially, it is that. So accreditation is a process of quality assurance and improvement, whereby a program in an approved institution is critically appraised to verify that the institution or program continues to meet and or exceed the norms and standards prescribed by the regulator from time to time. So one needs to, because you cannot keep the education static, but the regulatory body will keep redefining the norms from time to time, and the institution will have to understand them and implement them to the best of their ability. And as I mentioned, it's a kind of recognition which indicates that a program or institution fulfills certain standards. Now, as far as engineering is concerned, engineering programs are accredited by the NBA. It is individual programs. That is BE Mechanical Engineering. If you take as a program, and that is the one that is accredited by National Board of Accreditation. In a given institution, which offers, let us say, 7 programs, it is not necessary for all the programs to be accredited by NBA. For example, today, many colleges suffer from with respect to their programs in civil engineering. There are not enough number of students joining those civil engineering programs. Consequently, they cannot have full complement of faculty. And to that extent, if NBA comes to accredit that, they will find it is short on so many counts. So a civil engineering program in some of these institutions will not get accredited. It doesn't mean that they cannot award they cannot continue to offer the degree. If the students are joining, they can award the degree, but the program is not accredited. Whereas we don't have program-wise accreditation process with respect to general programs. A BA in literature, English literature, we don't have as of now anything that says I'm only accrediting BA in English literature. As far as general programs are concerned, it is educational institutions are considered for accreditation by NAAC. That means if a degree college which is offering, let's say, 15 programs, 15 BA, BSc programs, the entire institute is looked at by the NAAC, and it gives you institute level accreditation. We'll see that in later part of this presentation, what it means. Features of now we come to a little bit of nitty-gritty. What are the features of an outcome statement? First thing is, it should unambiguously state what the student should be able to do or perform. For example, you cannot say the student should get familiar with some topic. That is not a clearly stated outcome, because any familiarity is an internal change of state that cannot be observed. Unless I'm able to observe the behavior of the student, I cannot call it an outcome. And that is where it requires a little bit of practice from the faculty to write a proper type of outcomes. So first thing is, it should unambiguously state what the student should be able to do or perform. For example, perform means you can have a BA in music, or BA in drama, or BA in dance. There are programs like that. Obviously, the students have to perform. Even in sciences, they have to perform certain tasks in the laboratories. And whatever the students do or perform are observable and measurable. They have to be observable and measurable. If they are not measurable, it is not an outcome. Students should be able to understand what it means. You cannot write in a very complicated language, putting a lot of conditions and adjectives and so on, which makes it ambiguous, and it should be comprehensible. Because mind you, the students have to understand what is it that they should be able to do, and they are coming to you after 12th standard. And especially English being not our native language, one has to be very careful when you write in English, and the student should be able to understand. And students should be able to provide, actually the outcome statement itself should provide the guidance to students in planning their learning. We'll see some samples. Now comes the tougher part. Both NBA and NAAC, that is professional programs, actually NBA looks at something like 5 professional programs, including management. Whereas NAAC is an institution level. In both the cases, they recognize 2 levels of outcomes. One is at the program level, the other one is core activity level. Core Core activity means all students of that program will participate in the core activity. We call them core courses. There could be a project, whatever. There may be co-curricular activity which is compulsory for all. That's why we call it core activities. And at program level, you have two, again, further classification. What we call program outcomes. Program outcomes are statements that describe what the students graduating from a program should be able to do at the time of graduation, mind you. Okay? That means at the time of graduation, what should the graduates of that program be able to do? And program specific outcomes, these are statements that describe what the graduates of a specific program should be able to do at the time of graduation. What is the difference between the two? Let's say you have an institution that is giving some 15 programs. All the graduates of all the programs should attain the program outcomes. They're common. After all, graduates of any higher education program, they go out into the world. For majority of them, the first degree program is the terminal degree, and they participate in the world outside as responsible citizens. And whatever job that you do, there are certain aspects that you have to keep in mind or should know what it is for you to become an effective citizen. And that's why whatever institute considers very important for the graduates, they are stated as program outcomes. We'll see some samples. Whereas program specific outcomes, if I'm graduating in history, a BA in history, what is it that I should know with respect to my history? And I need to write a few statements about what exactly I am attaining in this, I'm required to attain as program specific outcomes. Whereas at core activity level, we call them course outcomes, as majority of the core activities constitute semester-wise courses. So COs are statements that describe what the student should be able to do at the end of a course. That's what course outcomes are. So there are two levels of outcomes. And another thing to be remembered, that the student is directly getting involved with his core activity. He is not directly getting involved with them. So it is a responsibility of the department offering the program to link these two and make sure that while I attain all these core level outcomes, I am also simultaneously achieving program outcomes and program specific outcomes. That is where the art of really writing the outcomes properly for the courses come. We'll show some samples. And coming to the professional programs, the outcomes that's at program level are identified for engineering by the NBA itself. So the institution doesn't have any choice of choosing the program. The NBA itself has written 12 program outcomes. They're right now, as they are written, they're tough to attain. Hopefully in near future, something will be done to slightly pacify them, but they are the program outcomes as written by NBA are really tough ones. So please remember that if you can attain them, there is nothing like it, but those program outcomes are really tough. We'll see some samples. In case of general programs, it is a university or the autonomous institution that needs to identify the POs that are also program non-specific. See, POs are program non-specific. That means they are the same for all programs in a given institution. In case of engineering, it is the NBA which writes them. For example, program outcomes of postgraduate engineering programs are also given by NBA. There are only 3 or 4 in number. Okay. Now let us look at some samples. In the case of engineering, we call it PO3, the third outcome statement, design and development of solutions, design solutions for complex engineering problems, and design system components or processes that meet the specified needs with appropriate consideration for the public health and safety and the cultural, societal, and environmental consideration. As you can see, it's a tall order. First of all, you are talking about solutions for complex engineering problems. Except by way, possibly in the project mode, most of the courses don't directly address complex engineering problems. And here, what are you talking about? Either you're designing solutions for complex engineering problems or designing system components. Some system is there. Let's say you are trying to design some shaft for some mechanical system, or you're designing a circuit, electronic circuit that performs a certain function, or processes. Let's say a particular manufacturing process that you have, either mechanical or chemical or metallurgical process, that meet the specified needs. So specified needs are really specifications. So the student should be familiar with specifications. Unfortunately, our Indian engineering programs don't spend any time with respect to specifications at all. They will only talk about the theory and hypothetical problems, like end of the chapter problems, and there is never any, at least say 90% of the time, there is no activity that starts from specifications backwards. And here, further tall order is, any solution should pay attention to public health and safety and the cultural, societal, and environmental concerns. To my knowledge, we still do not know, other than vaguely mentioning that, how they should be brought into specifications and how it should get reflected in the design of solutions. So we have a long way to go, but this is one of the POs that needs to be met by the NBA. Coming to general program outcomes, no agency specifies this is what you have to follow. But if you compare across the world, the outcomes of general programs, if you look at and make a list of them, all of them look more or less alike, not very different. But they don't say you have to do this. Whether should they be 5 or 6 in number, or 10 in number, 12 in number, that is also not stated. Like, let me give one example that is we have created along with some faculty. Critical thinking, this is a word that everyone talks about. I do not know whether knowingly or unknowingly, but everyone considers critical thinking is very important to any graduate student. What does it mean? Take informed actions after identifying the assumptions that frame our thinking and actions. So that is the first step. We very rarely do when we discuss. Checking out the degree to which these assumptions are accurate and valid, and looking at our ideas and decisions, either intellectual decisions, organizational or personal decisions from different perspectives. This is also tall order, but if one can attempt this, there is nothing like it. That is what critical thinking is. Okay, program specific outcomes. PSOs are outcomes that are specific to a program, and they characterize specificity of the core courses of the program, and also they can only be 2 to 4 in number, both NBA as well as NAAC is concerned. Let us see one example. Civil engineering. Survey, map, and plan layouts for building structures and alignments for canals and roads. This may be done through 4, 5, sometimes 6 courses. Okay, so you are capturing your core courses on this aspect through one sentence. And for example, in zoology, science program, in general program, perform procedures as per laboratory standards in the areas of biochemistry, bioinformatics, taxonomy, economic zoology, and ecology. As you can see, there are several laboratory standards in all these standards you come across through a number of courses through which you are trying to attain this outcome. What we will say with respect to outcomes, we use the word attain, not either achieve or any other succeed or anything like that. The word we keep using, attaining outcomes. Now, similarly, course outcomes are what students are required to demonstrate the end of a course. And mind you, as courses really constitute the dominant part of any curriculum, it is through courses only I can attain the POs and PSOs. So what happens is, but any one course if you take, they cannot address all the POs and PSOs. So you have to make sure what subset of POs and PSOs is that course trying to attain. Okay, so this is the part which you have to be careful in selecting. You cannot be arbitrary with respect to this. You have to demonstrate that you have actually attained these POs, PSOs through this course. Let us take a sample in engineering, computer science CS. Understand the divide and conquer strategy for designing algorithms, including merge sort and quick sort. Whereas in a general program on geology, determine the slope of the given topographical map using Wentworth method. It's very specific. Okay, you have to take a large number of topographical maps and see how the Wentworth method is to be used. And so this is the requirement of, let's say this is one course outcome. It is not the complete course. It is one of the course outcomes of a course in computer science. Now we come to another important issue. How do you write my outcomes? When I want to identify or write my outcomes, I need to have, after all, what are through outcomes we are trying to learn. So I need to know whether there is any taxonomy of learning. That means, can we have a common language with which two teachers can communicate with each other? Right now, in my opinion, that kind of commonly accepted taxonomy doesn't still exist in Indian context. I don't know, it may be true in many of the other countries, because it is the teachers who do not get formally trained in teaching. If you get formally trained in teaching, at least some amount of taxonomy would have been taught. But we all, including me, we all become teachers without any formal training in teaching and learning. And at least it is time now to talk about a formal method of teaching and learning. Now, how do you classify learning? People have been attempting to do that, and that's why several taxonomies exist. I'm only listing some: Bloom, Solow, Fink, Gagne, Marzano, and Kendall, etc. So what happens is, you're trying to somehow classify the activities that are taking place in the brain. And we hardly know enough information about the brain to say this is exactly what is happening. So several people made attempts through observing the behavior of the students or behavior of people, trying to have some kind of a classification of this learning. And as of now, the Bloom's taxonomy, which was introduced in 1956 and has been practiced, critiqued, researched, and again revised in year 2000, where we call it revised Bloom's taxonomy. It is not still possibly the ultimate, There will be limitations, but it is still, in my opinion, the best you can get as of now. It may be changed in the future. We do not know. So all taxonomies are attempts to give a structure to the process involved in learning based on observation of learning behaviors and the limited understanding how the brain functions. And our focus is on revised Bloom's taxonomy. We are not going to get into the details. I'll briefly make just give the final output. See, there are domains of learning. How many domains of learning do we have? As of now, people accept cognitive, and most of the time we look at cognitive dimension, cognitive domain actually, and you also have affective domain, which is very dominant. Unfortunately, we still do not know how to handle it in a formal sense. And whatever happens in the affective domain can very, very much regulate, control what happens in the cognitive domain. And then you have psychomotor domain, and you can also talk about spiritual domain. We'll keep it aside. In fact, that is also present all the time, but we don't touch it right now. But all these three domains of learning are involved to varying degrees in all intended learning experiences and activity. If you are sitting in the classroom, if you are, let's say a teacher is lecturing, he is doing mostly cognitive activities, and affective domain is dominant because the motivation of the student, what is his mood, whether he is not particularly interested in the subject, all that comes under the emotional part of the student, and that will affect. And if the teacher is not sensitive to the affective part, obviously he loses the students. He loses the attention of the students. If I lose the attention of the student, there is no learning that is taking place. And psychomotor is, you can say approximately, in the classroom, it is a body language of the both teacher and the students. Teacher can understand from the body language. That means your cognitive activity and affective part gets reflected through your body language, and a sensitive teacher can always feel what is happening in the class. So you can say all the three will be happening to varying degrees in any kind of learning activity. With respect to cognitive activity or cognitive domain, there are two dimensions. One is cognitive process and the other is knowledge categories. See, you are performing a cognitive activity. What is it that I am doing? I am remembering something, I am applying something, or I am creating something and so on. But on what? Certain knowledge elements. These knowledge elements come from a particular discipline or the course that you are doing. So there is, these two are two dimensions of cognitive domain. So let us look at what it is. The cognitive processes are revised Bloom's tax. As per revised Bloom's taxonomy, you have 6 cognitive levels or cognitive processes, if you prefer to do that. It's called remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. We will not be going through the details of this, but you can say there is a kind of hierarchy. That is, if I am involved in analyze activity, I am also involved in activities that come under apply, understand, and remember. Okay, that means it is hierarchically arranged. Create is the highest. And now categories of knowledge. These are general categories. We have 4 categories of knowledge: factual, facts and figures that you would know, and conceptual. That is what every teacher says, concepts are important. And until you start defining what a concept is, which actually in all of my association with faculty, it kind of silences all faculty when they want to define what a concept is. Please make an attempt to define what a concept is. And then you have procedural knowledge. procedure to do something. And then another area that is becoming very important is metacognitive knowledge. That is knowledge about my own cognition. Do I know this? How do you know? How much time do you have to spend to know this? All this, such things constitute metacognitive knowledge. And especially if you have students coming from a wide-ranging social backgrounds, social and economic backgrounds, the metacognitive dimension starts becoming important to ensure that they learn adequately. To carry them with you, you have to pay attention to the metacognitive dimension. We will not be going into the details of that. And by and large, the entire world looks at only these 4 categories. But these 4 categories, if I stick to them, I'm losing something that is very important to engineering. And there is a person by name Professor Vincenti who has done adequate work to identify there are some categories of knowledge specific to engineering. They cannot be subsumed under those 4 categories. These are fundamental design principles, criteria and specifications, sorry for the mistake, practical constraints, and design instrumentalities. We will not look at these things right now in detail to explain. So what we have is 6 categories of cognitive processes, 4 general categories of knowledge, and 4 categories of knowledge specific to engineering. So broadly, I classify my learning making use of this. Right now, we keep away from affective and psychomotor domain. There is adequate, some amount of work is done, but we are yet to see where you can write outcomes in the affective domain with respect to your course. That is still not practiced, and that is a challenge with which we are trying to address in near future. Now, we assuming that you understand these 6 cognitive levels and the categories of knowledge. Now, how do I write my outcome statement? So this is the structure that we give. First thing is there are 4 components in a outcome statement. One is action. You are performing some action, because if you remember, the definition of outcome is what the student should be able to do or perform. So it represents an action, and we now have 6 categories of actions. Either it could be remember, or you're performing some activity, we'll see. So action represents cognitive, affective, and psychomotor activity. Just for completion, I included those 2. The learner should perform. An action is indicated by an action verb, occasionally too representing the concerned cognitive process. And then what happens, this cognitive activity, you are performing on some knowledge, and the number of knowledge elements can be more than 1. So knowledge represents a specific knowledge from any 1 or more of the 4 knowledge categories. Okay. Then you should perform this action under some conditions. Let's say we say, using such and such a software tool, you must solve this problem or simulate such a system. So that is a condition. So condition represents the process the learner is expected to follow, or the condition under which to perform the action. Many times we say, solve this problem using this particular theorem, or using this particular concept. So they become the condition. And criteria. Criterion represents the parameters that characterize the acceptability levels of performing the action. For example, when I'm solving the problem, I might say, you have to give me the solution correctly up to the 2nd decimal place. May be following, but you may not be able to perform the required arithmetic, or maybe use the software tool properly to come to a solution that is accurate within 2 decimal places. So you have 4 elements: action, knowledge, condition, and criterion. Condition and criterion are optional because in all cases, I don't have to have the condition and criterion. So that is a structure which is fairly simple to see. Let us take a simple example. In a general program, a course on genetics, solve the problems in population genetics using Hardy-Weinberg law. This is written by some faculty member who is teaching genetics. Those of you who are in working on the course in genetics may want to modify this. I do not know because I am not an expert in genetics, but you may make it a little more elaborate or a little more specific and so on. Or maybe you want to use different laws as well to problems in population genetics. So here, if I do the analysis of the entire CO statement, action is the first one, that is solve. Solve this action verb, This action verb belongs to the cognitive category, cognitive process of apply. Knowledge is population genetics. So it is both conceptual and procedural. And condition using Hardy-Weinberg law, because you have to use this law to solve the population genetics, and we haven't put any criteria. That is, there is none. Let me take an engineering example. Determine the dynamic unbalanced conditions of a given mechanical system of rigid bodies subjected to force and acceleration. So determine is apply dynamic unbalanced conditions, conceptual and procedural. Condition is given mechanical system of rigid bodies subjected to force and acceleration. And there is no criteria. Okay. So these are 2 samples that we have given of CO statements and following this particular structure. Little bit of checklist. It should always start with an action verb like this: state, define, explain, calculate, identify, etc. And it should always be written in terms of student performance rather than teacher performance. Should never say they will be exposed, students will be exposed. It always should be with respect to the student, and it should be stated as a learning product rather than in terms of learning process. So what is the learning product? Determine the dynamic unbalanced conditions. Okay. And the CO should be stated at the proper level of generalities and relatively independent of other COs. And it should be attainable. And you should avoid using words like, such as, different, various, etc. These words are banned from writing a CO. That is the most common mistake anyone does when you first try to write the CO. It's an understandable issue, but that's why you have to go through iterations before you finalize your CO. And instead of write, such as is clear to you, but not to the student. So you have to enumerate all the relevant knowledge elements. Okay, let us look at these 3 principles are, in my opinion, the most important one in any program. First of all, students learn well when they're clear about what they should be able to do at the end of a course. That is course outcomes. And you may write beautiful course outcomes, but your assessment is not in alignment with these outcomes. Then the purpose is not served. If you keep on giving, say, define this, describe this, state this, if all of them are constrained to the predominantly remember level, then the assessment is not in alignment with the outcomes. We'll briefly touch the alignment a little later. And instructional activities are designed and conducted to facilitate the students to acquire and demonstrate what they're expected to do. That means there should be alignment among instruction, assessment, and course outcomes. This you use a simple diagram to show that. For example, I can show it as a table, like revised Bloom taxonomy table. You have 6 cognitive processes and 4 general categories of knowledge. So anything that you do, whether it is assessment or CO or instructional activity, can be located in one of these cells. Similarly, if you are taking an engineering course, you are having revised Bloom-Vincenti taxonomy table. We have the same 6 cognitive levels and 4 general and 4 categories specific to engineering. So this is the table that you can use very effectively in planning your instruction and assessment. For example, alignment means CO3 is the course outcome. AI3 is the assessment. Assessment is also located in the same cell, and instructional activities. I write this assessment I ask, but in the class, I will only define things and explain things and don't solve any problem there. That means this IA3 is not in this box. Possibly it is here or somewhere else. Okay, all the 3 should be in alignment. Now, this is a sample of one course in developmental biology where the outcomes are written. Majority of them are in the understand category. And as you can see, this course addresses a subset of POs and PSOs. PO1, PO3, PO3, PO5. So each course outcome is addressing a subset of POs and PSOs. And then we identify, tag the CO with the cognitive level. U means understand, and knowledge categories. Concept, C is conceptual, F is factual, and so on. And generally it is good to tag it with the number of classroom sessions that you take to show the kind of scope and importance of that. For example, CO5, the teacher has assigned 8 classroom sessions, whereas for the CO4, only taking half of that. But all of them, when you add it up in a semester, they should add up to, assuming that you have a 15-week teaching semester, then you are giving, it's a 3-credit course, then you can have 45 lectures. They should add up to this. And unfortunately, in majority of the colleges, they call it a 3-credit course and end up having 70 lectures and so on. That is, the course is overloaded with the content. That's a different issue we'll not talk about. Now coming to next level, both accreditation processes, NAAC and NBA, have what is called the quality loop that should be put into operation. Just hold on, please. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear, Professor.
Okay. The course is, what happens is, what is quality loop? That is, you have defined it in terms of course outcomes and they need to be attained. So I set a target for attaining these course outcomes. We will not work details how to set this target. This is where a little bit of each institute may do it in slightly different way, but it should be justified. So what happens, you set a target for the course outcomes, and course outcomes are assessed through certain assessment pattern. You have internal tests, assignments, and in the end you have final examination, and they carry different weights. It happens differently in different universities. And then these assessment pattern determines also the assessment instruments. Assessment instrument means it could be an assignment or a test paper or an end semester exam paper. They're all assessment instruments. And then their performance in these assessment instruments determines this student CO attainment. And how do I do that averaging over the entire class? How do I do that? Yes, there are different ways of doing it. We will not look at those details. Then what happens, the student attainment, compare it with the target. And then you have a gap in the target. That gap should lead to a plan for closing the CO gaps. Or if you have attained the target, you enhance the target. And also what happens, the student CO attainment further leads to PO, PSO attainment. That's a different story. We will not look at that either. But this is the quality loop. That means you set a target, you find out how the students have performed and compare it with the target. If the target is not achieved, you create a plan and implement it next time you offer. And if you have achieved the target, enhance the target. That is essentially what we call Deming's quality loop that needs to be closed. And closing this quality loop is the basic characteristic of all accreditation processes. Okay. So CO attainment, if you look at, as I mentioned, CIE, continuous internal evaluation, SE is semester and examination, and different universities, different colleges have different weightages given to them. That is for them to choose. And the number of assessment instruments used for CIE is decided by the instructor or the department, or sometimes even by the university if you are affiliated college. And assessment plan of CIE and SEE assessment instruments depends on the nature of institution. Okay, once again, as we said, there are different types of institutions. The processes will become different. Now here, I'm only presenting one table at the end of a long exercise. So here what happens is, let us say A1 is assignment 1. There is T1 is test 1, test 2, 5 marks, 10 marks, and 10 marks. So there is 25 marks only for CIE. So what do I do? When I'm doing test 1, I have only covered CO1, CO2, CO3, and CO4. So these 10 marks are distributed across the COs 3, 3, 2, and 2. Okay, that kind of gives me a method of designing the questions. I have to give 2 marks worth of questions from CO1. And similarly, 2 marks worth of questions. I may design my test instrument for 50 marks, but then finally I have to reduce it to 10. Okay, this is the proportion. Of course, this is where the teacher has the choice. Teacher may give 2 or even 1 for this, 3 for this, that is his choice. And he may change from one year to the other. All these are teacher's choices. And what happens, this other one, out of 2 marks, if I take the entire class, the class average happens to be 1.6. That is how we compute. When you come to the test 2, let's say in this case, we are not doing anything, asking any questions related to the first 4, and I'm only designing the test for the remaining ones. And I've distributed my marks like this. There is no need for this either, because we are only having 25 marks. Sorry. If I have 50 marks for the internal assessment, I will distribute it differently. And then what do? I combine all this and try to say, through CIE, I achieve for CO1 80%. So I compute the percentage of attainment for each CO in continuous internal evaluation. And in the final exam also, the end semester exam, the marks are distributed across this, and I find the class averages and combine the CIE class average with the end semester exam class average and try to get this. And what do I get? This is the target. Sorry, I didn't have the other column. The gap that is coming is minus 7.63. That means I've gone beyond this target. Okay, whereas in this case, I attained, the target is 65 and what I achieved is 62.5. So 3.5 is the attainment gap in terms of percentage. You work it out like this and then inspect each one. What do I do? Because I have gone way beyond 55, I raise the target to 65. Similarly here to 65. And here I look at CO3, and as a teacher I know what were the difficulties in this, and in this process, what is the plan that I have for closing the gap? Here I took a stand saying present 2 more videos of 15 minutes each, and I give the link there. So like that, each CO in my course, I analyze this, why the gap is there, and decide what exactly is to be done when I offer the same course next time. So this is how the closing the quality loop works. And this has to be demonstrated to the visiting committee that comes under the accreditation. Now, PO, PSO attainment also, you have a similar quality loop. PO, PSO targets and PO, PSO attainments, and then the attainment gap. It leads to plan for closing the gaps or enhancement of the targets. But mind you, each PO, if you take, is not coming from one course. It is coming from several courses. And you have to combine all that attainment of those POs and convert into a major matrix like this. For example, in a general program, there are 6 POs and there are 4 PSOs. And these are the courses and other core activities, including project. It could be field work, anything. And then the attainment levels I have worked out like this. And then I compute the average. Even there are views about how do we compute the average. We will not get into that. And this is finally average attainment. And I compare it with the target and make a decision. That is how we talk about attainment of the targets. Okay. Sorry, we are almost there. 2 or 3 more slides. And you have to have a feel for both NBA and NAAC criterion. The NBA, both of them are based on what is called Malcolm-Baldrige quality system. According to that, it can be applied to an organization or to a program or to anything. 1,000 marks are given. 1,000 marks are divided into several criteria. And depending on the relative importance of them, you give the weightage. With respect to NBA, there are 10 criteria. 3 of them are institute level criteria. 7 of them are program specific. But these also become important to the department because it's the department that is getting the accreditation. So if you look at, and there are 2 types of institution, tier 1 and tier 2. The marks are slightly different, as you can see, but on majority of them, they're practically the same. And if you look at criterion 2, 3, 4, and 7, and even 8, they're all related to teaching and learning. And that is where they carry, as if you add all of them, they add up to fairly large, significant percentage of 1,000 marks. So if you do them well, you score marks, And actually in this, if scoring marks and performing well in your department or with respect to your students, they should mean the same. That is how these are designed. And whereas NAAC assessment summary, what do you have? They have only 7 criteria. And as you can see, because it's in institutional level accreditation, they look at more than teaching and learning. They look at research, innovations, and extension. As you can see, there are fairly large, especially university, there are fairly large number of marks. And it is not that affiliated college, like a degree college, cannot just kind of ignore saying that we are a teaching institution. You cannot, as you can see, 120 marks are given. So no educational institution can consider that is merely a teaching institution. It can be 80-20. 80% of my time I teach, but 20% of time I have to do a few more things. And that is what we are, not the administration, but other one like research, innovation, extension, whatever you call. And as you can see, the number of marks associated with teaching and learning are obviously much less because you are looking at many other factors like institutional values, best practices, student support and progression, infrastructure and learning resources. As you can see, this is where the college will have to make sure the learning resources, this is where the technology comes into picture. Okay, but NAAC does it in a different way than NBA. What happens is, these are, you have, these are divided into key indicators. That means under each criterion, there are key indicators. Under each key indicator, you have some kind of a metric, qualitative or quantitative metric. And what happens is, the quantitative metric, they have now done what NAAC has done it. It is evaluated by a software tool. We will not get into the detail, but as you can see, in the case of university, 99 are quantitative metrics and they are automatically evaluated by the software. The visiting team will only look at qualitative metrics. Okay, we will not get into those details. As you can see, institutional accreditation is different from program accreditation. For example, an engineering college can get each one of its program accredited separately and then go for institutional accreditation as well. Whereas the colleges which are offering general programs, as of now, to my knowledge, unless they're offering an engineering program, they don't have any provision for program-wise accreditation. Let's say a BA in Sanskrit literature. If I want that to be accredited, there is no such thing. Now, in summary, it was established that communicating to the students at the beginning of a learning experience what they're expected to be able to do greatly improves their performance. This has been established through very heavy research that the performance of the students have greatly improved by merely presenting what the course outcomes unambiguously. Okay, so writing course outcomes or outcome-based education becomes very important. And program outcomes are the same across all programs offered by an institution. An institution can differentiate itself through its POs in case of general programs, and NBA specifies the POs of engineering programs. And program-specific outcomes are specific to a program. A program can differentiate itself through its PSOs. And writing good COs is the first step. Writing, in my opinion, more importantly, writing assessment items for all summative assessment instruments in alignment with COs should follow. That is part of what we call designing your course. And in this process, taxonomy tables can greatly help. Tag the assessment items with COs, cognitive levels and marks allocated, and instruction should be designed and implemented to prepare the students perform well in all assignments, tests and examinations. Performing well in tests and examination and learning well should be synonymous. That is the, in my opinion, litmus test for your instruction. Right now, for example, students, let's take one of the bad examples. What do you call first course in programming or introduction to programming in all colleges given? All of them get, there is 90%, 95% success rate. Marks are quite given liberally, but no company wants to hire them for even coding because they can't code beyond the problems they have solved or not solved or familiar with in the course. So what happens is the tests and examination, performing well in that, that means it is a problem with the assessment, and learning well should be synonymous. If you are able to achieve that, you have achieved learning. Okay? So marks and learning should mean the same. No teacher should ever say in the classroom, don't focus on exams, focus on learning well. No teacher should ever make that statement in the classroom. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Rao, for such an elaborative session. All participants must be thinking with these all great details. Oh, is it really complicated to go through this? There are many platforms available which is going to ease out. Now we give a break of 5 minutes to Professor Rao for question answer sessions, and in between I invite Mr. Kannan for telling our participants how complex method can be very easy by a platform. Over to you, Mr. Kannan.
Hello, everyone. Professor, you may have to stop sharing your screen.
Okay, okay.
Very, very insightful session, thought-provoking. So that takes what technology can bring in to help to simplify some of these complex computations and implementations that institutions need to go. So I would like to take few minutes of your time to explain how technology can help in implementing the outcome-based education in our context.
Mr. Kannan, I think you can share the screen now.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So QuickLearn is an adaptive learning platform developed by few of senior executives where in industry from put together 100+ years of experience. And our idea was that how we can bring the technology integration Professor Chandrashekhar mentioned in the beginning of the discussion into the complex implementation requirements of an outcome-based education, how we can bring these things together. And also, as Professor Rao mentioned, it has to enhance the learning experience for the students. So this is the two fundamental principles of integrating all the components that required for delivering an e-learning activities and tying in technology to simplify the implementation for any outcome-based education framework. That is the focus of a QuickLearn platform. I will not take much time, but to give a brief introduction. The platform has 5 major components. One, course management, which is end-to-end digital transformation of all the academic activities, which Professor Rao mentioned, creating, writing down the CO, capturing the teaching learning process, how the sessions are conducted. All those things are aligned to the outcome-based education framework. And the second component is that the content organizer, which the faculty would like the students to go through as a part of a learning experience, can be integrated with the content of all possible sources. There is absolutely no limit. Right from faculty created contents to the publisher ebooks, library resources, everything can be integrated into this content organizer, which is another component of curriculum. Third is that course delivery, right? It's no more just a in-classroom delivery model. The delivery model could be in classroom, virtual sessions, self-study based delivery. So all possible course delivery model is managed with the course delivery module. And as Professor Rao mentioned, the assessment is a very critical component of measurements of attainment. So we have a quick learn module, a digital exam comprehensively addresses the requirement of assessments for all the institutes, right? And it is also comes with a very beautiful personal learning assistant, which is simplifies the user interface for the learners, giving them access anytime, anywhere, from mobile phone, desktops, laptops, from at any point of time. So an integrated learning environment, integrating all technologies, which is essential for e-learning, is the fundamental core of Quick Learn platform. I'll take 2 slides only to explain. One is that as a platform, it provides an end-to-end digital transformation of all academic activities, right from course management, assessment, content management, and also interestingly, we have integrated the library management solution like Koha, catalog management solutions like JGate, in collaboration, partnership with Informatics. So we are together in this, in ensuring that all the content that is required for enhancing the learning experience is presented, right? And it's a cloud-based platform. No infrastructure is required at the institute to implement it, and it can be deployed in a few hours. And this platform is already being used extensively by top engineering colleges like RVC in Bangalore, top management colleges like IIT Institute of Management, and there is a dental college, it's from a medicine side, and there are arts and science stream. So we have a vast spectrum of users using this platform. We have delivered thousands of courses and assessments through this platform. Now coming specifically to outcome-based education, right? What this platform does is that simplification. That's the core of the Quick Learn with respect to the outcome-based implementation. The course delivery model and the course management model helps the institute capture all the documentations and assessments, course outcomes, attainments, everything in a very simple form. And also it helps in auto compute of all the computations which Professor Rao mentioned in his presentation. That all the automatic computations has been taken care by the platform itself. So the faculty need not do any computation. Once the assessment and the score is assigned, then the computation is automated by the platform. And also very important, when all these activities are done for a course, a course file summarizing all the activities that is done and where the attainment is achieved, where there is a gap, all this information are graphically captured and responded by the platform, and that it helps in very, very easy and simple rollout of implementation of outcome-based education, right? I would like to end the presentation with a simple video demonstrating the features of the platform. so that you can see yourself how we are integrated many different technologies and made the user interface very simple, at the same time delivering the documentations and the assessments required for accreditation and other requirements.
Enabling teachers to effectively work from their homes and engage remotely with the students. RV Dental
Hope you are able
College has
to hear the
implemented
audio,
Quick
right?
Learn, an AI-based teaching learning platform.
Yes.
Teachers are taking the courses online with the virtual classroom sessions.
So this is a
Both teachers and students are happy with the
study of
virtual method of
a one
engagement during the lockdown
implementation
period. The
in a
students
dental
are
college.
provided access to library ebooks, lecture pre-reads, session presentations, quizzes and assignments using the
And you
Quick Learn
can see a
Smart
mobile
app-based
interface here.
interface. The pre-reads improves session participation, and lecture presentations help students to recall and remember the session discussions. Virtual Classroom helps teachers to connect with their students during the period of lockdown. The teacher uses the time productively to complete the syllabus, which otherwise would have not got completed. Students can find their teachers online and can clarify their doubts. Session with 60+ students can be managed comfortably. There are multiple facilities like chat, whiteboard, and poll available with the teacher to engage during the session.
Everyone, I think yesterday I had sent some pre-reading material. Hope most of you have seen it. Okay.
Many of you are asked for this recording of Professor Rao's presentation of this webinar. We will share with you the recording of this presentation with an interesting twist, that we will give you the recording indexing the keywords and key phrases so that it helps you to simplify the search using an AI-based markers. As you see here, we give you the key phrases and keywords spoken in the video, and it can be easily searched. This is a you will get a recording of this webinar with this feature.
Acute pseudomembranous candidiasis, also known as oral thrush. Pseudomembrane. That pseudomembrane appears as a white patch, and this white. So
this is the personal
Quick
learning
Learn
assistant
provides an
I was
AI-powered
mentioning
smart
about.
reading interface
Next,
for the students.
enhancing
All
the learning
library
experience
ebooks,
for the
lecture
student.
presentations, and articles shared using the Quick Learn platform will have an intelligent reader. The ebooks will have text-to-audio function that helps to read aloud the content.
Reversible pulpitis. A tooth with reversible pulpitis is acutely painful when a stimulus, usually cold or sweet.
The Learning Assistant helps students to understand the topic using relevant concept videos and articles. Let us see how it works.
It integrates content from any source contextually. You see that all these things are happening inside that same platform. You are not stepping out of the platform to access the content. That makes the learning experience for the student very, very enjoyable.
The local language translator provides meaning and translation, which students from vernacular background find extremely useful. This unique functionality helps the students to understand and learn faster.
You can get the content presentation translated to your language.
The Quick Learn platform captures data at all levels of academic operations, from institute-level information down to individual students' learning activities. The data provides unparalleled insights into the learning behavior of students that helps identify slow and advanced learners. Teachers have adapted very well to the new teaching methodology using virtual classrooms. Here are some of responses from them. Thank you for watching this video.
Thank you, Mr. Kannan, for your brief presentation on how technology can be used. This platform can be used for converting this complex technology which Professor Rao has mentioned to very simplified way, and users can use it properly. May I request Professor Rao and Professor R. Chandrashekhar for question answer session, please.
Yes, we are available.
Yes.
There are
More than 200 questions available. May I request Professor RC to.
Absolutely. So that has been a extremely engaging session. Thanks to Professor Rao and Mr. Kannan to have nicely complemented each other in your presentations. So I am very excited, and as rightly observed, this is essentially a webinar. So there are, I can see there are more than 200 questions. I'm afraid I have been scanning through the questions, and I have tried to distill all of it, because the target for me is to wrap up the session by 5 p.m. So I have distilled and about 3 or 4 abstract questions, I think, which is bothering most of the students here. So one is that what will be the shift in the role of, if any, and the role of outcome-based education in the post-COVID-19 scenario, because that is something that is in everybody's mind, right? So will the shift, will there be, if there is a shift to e-learning as a dominant mechanism, so what will happen to all the expectations set around OBE, accreditation, and things like that? What do we, how do we brace ourselves for this? Any thoughts, Professor Rao?
Okay. First of all, the online learning will only supplement what happens in an institute. One should remember, a program is not merely a small collection of courses. Besides the classroom, there is a lot of activity that takes place outside among the students, between students and faculty, and among faculty. And there are several so-called non-core activities that also take place. All of them contribute to attaining the program outcomes. If you consider program outcomes is the primary thing. If you don't accept it, is a different thing. But program outcomes characterize a program. If you want all of them to be met, it cannot be, at least in near future, cannot be attained purely through online learning. But online learning or the ICT tools that are available can greatly enhance the quality of learning. If you start with the premise, you can make a lot of difference to the quality of learning.
Excellent. I think that is essentially the essence of this whole thing, saying that we should look at all of these things as being complementary to each other and not as replacements of each other. That's excellent. My next question is for Mr. Kannan. So one of the complaints, if I may use the word, that all this accreditation process are incredibly documentation heavy. So are the technologies mature enough now to be able to automate, and to what extent? And if I were to ask you to put a number in the scale of 1 to 10, to what extent can this be automated?
Okay. Thank you, Professor. That's a very, very important question, right? I just wanted to go back to that chart which Professor Rao mentioned with respect to accreditation and the scoring scheme, right? And he mentioned there are certain elements of teaching learning process has a very high score, right? That high score components of it requires certain amount of detailed documentation with an authenticated execution of how these things are executed, right? So this is where the platforms comes into play. So the platform captures right from the course definition to the program capturing as per the university definition, course outcome capturing, and every session activities. Like Professor Rao mentioned in one of his sample, 45 session. What happens in this 45 session? What is got delivered? what is the course outcomes were intended in those sessions. All those things, the faculty can capture it on the go. So every day, after the class is done, the data can be fed in or automatically captured the information. All these informations are auto-captured, and the assessment scores, once it is recorded automatically inside the session. At the end of the day, the tool gives an automated, beautifully prepared report, which can be a supplement to the other documentation that will be needed for accreditation requirements.
So I'll still put you in a spot. So if you have to pick a number between 1 and 10, what is the current level of maturity of technology for automating the documentation?
I would go somewhere close to about 6.5 to 7.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so I'll probably wrap up with one slightly more philosophical question to Professor Rao. See, now when we talk about outcome-based education, we expect the students to have attained all those outcomes and so on. But still, if you look at the graduation requirements, we all assess the programs as far as the accreditation is concerned. But the student, when they graduate, so they question, at least three of the participants have asked, why aren't these captured as part of the transcript of the student or even used as a criteria for award of degrees?
Okay, if you want, but you are not used to it. See, what happens is, when we are talking about program outcomes, we are talking about class averages. But individual students perform differently. So you are giving them the grades. But for example, if somebody got an A grade in one particular course, that means if your assessment is proper, it is unbiased, then in that case, he has attained those, not only the course outcomes, but also those program outcomes.
Okay.
So the knowledge about the grades, if the entire process is appropriate, the grades capture his attainments.
Excellent. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful way of looking at it, Professor. In fact, so at an individual level, so what this also means is that when at the time of assigning the grades, the faculty members should certainly look at the individual attainments that have been obtained and assign the grades accordingly, so that it is a true reflection of the overall attainment. Excellent. I really, really wish we could take on more questions, but I would like to thank Professor Rao and Mr. Kannan and the entire Informatica team as well for having given this opportunity for me to chair this particular session. I think before closing, there is an overwhelming request for the slides and the presentation. I just request Professor Rao to even add one slide on references for additional reading, which will help the participants. So with that, I hand it back to Mr. Devkant. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, Professor RC. I take this opportunity in thanking first Professor N J Rao, who is the authority in the outcome-based education. We learned many important viewpoints of Professor Rao, which gave us from last 50 to 60 minutes. The Professor Rao is going to definitely help all students, faculties on how e-learning can help them during this lockdown condition, and how it is going to help all the administrators in colleges and universities for preparing the documentation required for accreditation bodies like NBA, NAAC, etc. Thank Professor R. Chandrashekhar for sparing his valuable time from his busy schedule and chairing the session. Very nicely he said the context in today's e-learning and importance of outcome-based education and importance of technology in outcome-based education. I certainly thank Mr. Subramanian Kannan for his brief introduction of learning management solution, Quick Learn, which can help all the stakeholders like students for their studies as per the curriculum. They can bring their personal study material other than library content on this platform, which becomes very convenient for them. For faculties, they can plan their session and topics. They can see which student is performing better in which subject and where is he weak. And accordingly, they can focus on pushing for that kind of subject. For deans and registrars and VC, this becomes very important platform, the Quick Learn, which helps them in documentation, which is readily available as per the requirement of accrediting bodies like NAAC, NBA. Thanks, Kannan, again for this brief information. This is definitely going to help all participants for planning e-learning programs. And the question answer session was really important. That really helped to solve some of the queries that are resolved now. I thank Mr. Sanjay Grover for introducing informatics and its activities from last 40 years. I thank Mr. N V Satyanarayana, founder of Informatics, under whose leadership informatics has become the passage to knowledge from last 40 years. Finally, I thank all participants for their active participation. By way of their questions, in a question and answer box, we can see their active participation was there till the end. You all had a choice of attending, the other parallel seminars, but looking at the quality of speakers and the topic of the webinar, you all chose to be in this webinar. I, Devendra, on behalf of Informatics, thank all those who attended today. There were 1,500 plus participants in this webinar. Those attend this by registering on this platform, and I thank all those who have attended on Facebook Live. Thank you to all libraries and our customers for traveling with us in this passage to knowledge. One small announcement that we are getting so many messages in the chat box also and Q&A box also that many people want PPT. Let me announce here, we'll be sending a mail separately to each one of you with the recording of this session, the presentation which Professor Rao delivered today. And actually we are not giving certificates, but those who request for it will give certificates to all those who are requesting for it. A big thank you to all of you. Thank you very much.